ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, the Real Music Observer, just sitting back and enjoying life, talking about real music in real time for real people just like you right there, just like me here. Former Bad Company singer Brian Howe, who has been inactive and active and certainly a guy who can still sing, has pretty much announced that he's calling it quits when it comes to rock and roll. He's decided to move to Nashville and maybe do some songwriting up there, and even hinted at maybe doing some country music, which is interesting. Look, this is a weird development to me. Brian Howe, again, can still really bring it. He lives not too far from me. In fact, he's selling his house down here in Florida and moving up to Nashville. So you probably won't see this in the big rock media, places like Ultimate Classic Rock, unless they pick up on the story. You know, for years I've been suggesting that the folks over at the Paul Rodgers version of Bad Company and, Brian eventually get together and maybe do a show where Brian opens for Paul. They do the Bad Company of Brian Howe, and then they do the Bad Company of Paul Rodgers. I think it would be a great marketing tool. You get basically all, the history of the band. I think a lot of fans and critics sort of wrote off the Brian Howe version of Bad Company as being, your typical arena rock. But I was there, I was in radio at the time, and those albums, starting with Dangerous Age and finishing up with Here Comes Trouble, those three albums, and of course Holy Water in between, those things did so well on rock radio stations, even getting into the top 40 market with a tune like If You Needed Somebody. It's just a shame that Brian, I think over the years, he recently had some health problems, and that might have refocused his priorities. I'm not sure. I think he's a little fed up, though, with the industry, as he said, classic rock, and this was a statement directly from him. He said that classic rock is kind of prehistoric, and I just was a little taken aback by that. So I think he's frustrated with the industry itself, and I share some of those frustrations. I am shocked that a label like Frontiers hasn't approached him and said, hey, let's do an album. You have still a great... And he does. He's 65. He can still bring it. He can still sing like he did 30, 40 years ago. He really can. And it's kind of a shame that he's decided to kind of hang it up. But... all I can say is I think if Bad Company had received him back and said, sure, let's do kind of a Paul and Brian show where we have everybody out there, maybe not all at once. Like I say, you have Brian open for Paul and they do the entire Bad Company catalog. Brian can obviously stick to all of the stuff he sang with the group rather than singing some of Paul's material. But for whatever reason, I know there are a couple of guys, I think, who didn't part company well with Brian when he left. And I'm thinking primarily just the drummer right now, Simon Kirke, might have issues with Brian Howe. And if he does, that's kind of just stupid. It should just be water under the bridge at this point. But Brian's off to Nashville. Kind of a shame. Great voice, great singer. Had this tune called Hot Tin Roof that you got to go listen to if you haven't heard it from a couple of years back. Was one of the best songs of a couple of years ago, at least in my estimation, as far as new melodic rock goes. And you put that up against the stuff he recorded back in the 80s, and the voice sounds the same. There's just no degradation at all in the way the guy sings. He can still bring it, and pitch perfect, as I like to say. So long, Brian Howe. I mean, you got me through a lot of those crazy nights back in the late 80s listening to things like Boys Cry Tough and all those songs from Holy Water. Just really great material that he and I think it was Terry Thomas at the time composed together to keep that franchise going. And I think he should be respected for doing that, because that was not an easy feat to go in there and basically take the brand, revamp it, and make it successful. So good luck, Brian. Hope you continue on with your endeavors and do well. See you soon, everybody.